The people with tohu and tawhiti escaped inland, and then they came back to this area to be next to Taikomako, and they created this community here at Parihaka. It didn't have the name of Parihaka. As far as I know, the name Parihaka refers to where the land comes down low to the river. So all the way along, if you look at Waitotoroa, there are quite high banks. Well, Parihaka means low banks. The Parihaka, like haka means to go down low. That's why we do the haka. Kei te haka. So Parihaka, the area where the land comes down low towards the river, and they built their community in this area. The name, one of the places that they built, some people say was the first, others say there were others as well before that. But one of the key areas, the focal points, was the building of this marae out here. And they built the marae, they built underground drainage because it was a little bit swampy, so they built a drain and then covered it back over. As far as I know, the drain is still under the marae from way back in 1865, end of 1865. And they created that marae, and just as they were about to finish, on the last day, an albatross landed on the marae. Now, albatross, today, there aren't many albatross in the North Island, but they weren't so uncommon that people didn't know about them in the North Island. But it was still very unusual to see an albatross anywhere around inland. Apparently, it happens quite often with albatross when they get blown inland by the wind. They seek shelter until they get their strength, and then they fly off. Well, this albatross landed on the marae, and it stayed there the whole day. No one touched it, no one went or frightened it, which is our normal tikanga. If a bird flies in your house, you don't try and shoo it out, because as far as our tupuna view, it's he tohu tera. It's a sign, it's saying something to you. So you just open the windows in your house or open the doors and just allow it to fly out naturally of its own accord. In a similar way with the Toroa that was on the Marae, no one went near it, they allowed it to sit there. It stayed there all day, and at the end it flew off. And when it flew off, and it left a feather on the Marae. Now, according to Rangi Kotuku, our kaumātua of here, that feather was still in Te Raukura when it burnt down in 1960 in a glass cabinet. That was the feather that was left by that bird, the albatross that was on the marae. How do we know about the albatross? Well, it's recorded in the name of the marae. So Toroanui means the large albatross, and the large albatross is a direct reference to the significance of that event of the albatross landing on the marae. At that point, they didn't really know what the significance of this feather was, or what the significance of the albatross was. As I said before, this is the end of 1865, and they were only just establishing Parihaka as a community. They made a rule at that point. Under the proclamation, ka kuhuna te patu, ka puru te toto. So the patu, patu parawa, like a club or a mere, will be sheathed, will be put aside. So what they're really referring to is weapons of warfare will be completely put aside. There will be no weapons of warfare associated with Parihaka. Sometimes they had taiaha and those things, but they were never used or never focused on any way around violence. And then ka puru te toto is the flow of blood will be staunched, will be stopped. So they made the agreement when they came to Parihaka, under no circumstances would anyone resort to violence. That was the beginning of this very strong belief and focus on non-violence. And it was from that point in 1865, the end of 1865, that the people of Parihaka lived in peace and built a large community. Most of the people that came into Parihaka, so when I said there were the war within Taranaki ended, the main war against Von Tempsky and all of them ended in 69. So for 4 years, Parihaka was almost like a refugee centre. People had nowhere to go, so they came to Parihaka. And after a short while, there were literally thousands of people living in Parihaka. And as a result, they made rules that were radically different to what normally our tupuna were used to. So things such as, if someone abuses you, if someone hits you, if someone attacks you, you respond with goodness. You respond with love. So ka utua te kino ki te pai, o ka hinga, ka mate te kino i te pai. They made a proclamation, ka tukua te mata o taku ea arero kia pakanga ki ngā maunga nunui o te ao. Ka hinga, ka mate te kino i te pai i te mea ko taku pakanga, e pakanga mo te rangi Māori. So they made that statement saying, I am going to send out my tongue to do battle with the tallest mountains of the world. Hatred will be overcome through love, because my battle is now a battle of well-being, of goodness, of peace. They made those statements and they ensured that everyone that came into Parihaka adhered to those things. They made statements such as, no te reme te tau ko te tau kairunga. In the year of the Lamb, we will prosper. So the concept of the Lamb is that the Lamb is not able to protect itself from the wolf. But with the right protection and the right strategies and the right guidance, the Lamb is able, the lambs, the sheep are able to thrive under the right protection. So, koera, itahi o ngā kōrero, those are some of the statements. So Parihaka from 1865 through to 1878. How much is that? How long is that? 1865 to 1878? 13 years. For 13 years, the people of Parihaka put all of their effort into cultivating food. As far as Parihaka is concerned, the main focus for Parihaka is cultivating food, because cultivated food is the epitome, is the pinnacle of peace. You work together, you produce food, and you share it with whoever comes. That is the key philosophy of Parihaka. It's been a long time, but we're getting our gardens up and going again. So everyone worked in the gardens. We had people who were rangatira of the highest level, and we had people who had been enslaved by tribes in the north. They came from all walks of life and all backgrounds, and they were all welcomed, and everyone was the same. Everyone worked in the gardens. There were no bosses telling everyone, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. They all worked together, and they all decided on what was their activity that they would put their attention into. They lived like that for 13 years, and Parihaka became a huge, thriving settlement. It's said to have been the biggest settlement in the country, Māori settlement in the country at that time. It reached at its height 7,000 people living permanently within this area. 7,000 is a lot of people. And you imagine 7,000 people all pooling their effort, working together, cultivating food. And before long, people from around the country started to come to Parihaka to try and understand what they were doing as a strategy to get out from the oppression that they were being faced in their regions. And so the people from Waikato, they came and they built a marae. The people from Muaupoko, they built their marae. Wanganui came, they built Ngā Ruahine. The focus in Parihaka is that each group of people that came, they were given land and they built their own marae to look after their own people, to maintain their identity, but to share together and work as a collective. They believed, Ngā Ruahine and Taranaki believed that they had negotiated with the Crown that from Hangatahua, you know where Hangatahua is, the river? It's otherwise known as Stony River. It's such a strange name. The Stony River because it's got a lot of stones in it. Very imaginative. This side of Okato, Hangatahua is the Māori name of that river. From there all the way through to Waingongoro, which is just on the other side of Manaia. You go past Manaia, past Kapuni, you come to Waingongoro. That area there would be left alone because the people in this area did not retaliate against the Crown. And they believed that they had negotiated that they would be able to develop this area economically and to provide a home to all of those Māori who had been dispossessed through the confiscation of their lands. As I said before, these lands were all confiscated. However, under the law, it said that anyone who is not in active rebellion against the crown, they would have their lands returned to them. So that's what the view that Parihaka took. However, when in 1878, when the surveyors, because what happened is the surveyors started in Kaiwi and another group in Moko, they started surveying, and as they surveyed, they allocated the land to the soldiers. The government was bankrupted by the war, and so they didn't pay soldiers with money, they paid them with land. So if they fought for 6 months, they got X number of acres of land. And so as they surveyed, the land got allocated, and you can see what happens is the people sort of get herded to the westernmost point. And where we are in Parihaka, if you look on the map and you head directly to the sea, this is the westernmost point of the region. All of those Māori communities got herded from the north and the south into the area where we are now. So Tohu and Tawhiti and other leaders believed that they had negotiated that between the areas of Waingongoro and Hangatahua would be left alone and people would be able to live, and that land would be returned to them. However, when the surveyors reached Waingongoro in the south, they didn't stop there, they carried on surveying. And so when they carried on surveying, huge protests from Parihaka and the Ngārue Hine were put to the government, in particular their land agent, Robert Paris. Paris was the land agent at the time, saying, you've gone back on your word, you're carrying on, your intention is to take all of this land. And the government said, well, we didn't make any, where is it written? And they didn't have it written. It was an agreement that they had made, and so they carried on coming around this area. When they reached almost to Pihama, our people started to protest physically. So what they did is they sent groups out to pull pegs up, the surveyors' pegs, and to disrupt the surveying activity. What happened is when they sent out groups, they didn't go at night and pull out the pegs. They went out in broad daylight, started pulling out the pegs in front for everyone to see. And when the police came along, when the soldiers came along, they just stood there. They didn't, and if they were yelled at, asked what they were doing, they didn't respond, they just stood there. And then they were pulled away, carted away, and put in prison. And then the surveyors continued past. If you look at this area, there's lots of hills, heaps of hills. You didn't have your cultivations on the hills. You had your cultivations on the flats below. And so when you're building roads, as the surveyors were doing, you built the roads not over and up and over hills. You went through the flats. And so naturally, where they did their surveying and where they built their roads was through cultivations. And so they trampled through, they broke down all of the fences of the cultivations, put their roads through the middle. What the people of Parihaka did and Ngārue Hine is they went there again in broad daylight, first thing in the morning, first light. They went out there and they started rebuilding the fences that the soldiers had destroyed. So they gathered all of the wood back together and put the fences back where they were originally. Again, not retaliating, not abusing, just quietly rebuilding the fences. When the soldiers came, what did they do? They just stood there. They just stood there, they didn't respond. Sometimes they were beaten, sometimes there's a couple of examples of them being stabbed with bayonets, those sorts of things, but they didn't retaliate. They were carted away to prison. Before long, the prisons of New Plymouth were chock-up with prisoners from Parihaka and Ngārue Hine. And they didn't know what to do. They sent a lot of them, many of them, down to Wellington. They didn't know what to do with them because under the law at that time, the only thing they could really charge them with was trespass and public nuisance. But under that law, the longest they could hold them was maybe 2 or 3 months. And they knew that if they tried them, then they would have to be locked away for 2 or 3 months, then they'd have to let them go. But the government wanted to hold on to them indefinitely. So they sent them away without trial down into Wellington and then eventually down to the South Island, into Dunedin, into Christchurch, Nelson, Hokitika, and Kaikoura were the main areas where they were set, and were put to hard labour. So from 1879, there was the major groups were sent down to the South Island, and they were imprisoned. They came back, they were returned in 1881. In 1881, they were released, given that most of the men by that time had been imprisoned. However, when they were returned, they came back to Parihaka and they planned their next strategy. How would they ensure that the government knew that Māori within this region didn't recognise the confiscation of their lands? So they decided to demonstrate, as most Māori know, if you're going to demonstrate occupation, the best way to demonstrate occupation, one is to light fires and keep a fire going, but the other one is to show active cultivations. So they sent plough teams out to plough the land to demonstrate to the Crown that as far as they were concerned, the land was still Māori land. And so they sent out plough teams, and they first thing in the morning, there they were, and they started ploughing. The soldiers came along. What did they do when the soldiers turned up? They just stood there, and they were carted off to prison. So all the way through that period, 1881, and the protests, the Crown refused to negotiate, refused to accept any discussion with the people of Parihaka or others associated with Parihaka. And so before long, most of the men, virtually all of their ploughs, all of their oxen were all gone, and